All right, folks, welcome to the KeltShow. I have just notified on Twitter that this is starting. We're going to learn about the Celts, at least, and it'll be quite different from what you've read before. Now, soon I'm going to make sure that this is actually all working fine. It does seem to me that it is. Let's see. Let's see what Wikipedia says about them. It's always a great place to start. All right. So it says here, the Celts. And it says that it's pronounced the way I'm pronouncing, not Celts. Or Celtic peoples, again with the K, were a collection of Indo-European peoples in Europe and Anatolia, identified by their use of Celtic languages and other cultural similarities. Now, let's stop here. There's already a problem here. Because how is it that people are identified by their language and their culture? Isn't that the opposite direction? I believe so. And there is a clip that I could show you from Mr. Collis. I'm going to write down here to do this later in the stream. Collis clip, show him saying that the direction of languages, no, the direction of naming is from people to languages, not vice versa. But we can give some examples here. By the way, folks, this is a stream that is, as you can see, things happen in them, and I'm taking notes as well. I'm going to have these notes in a place where you can go through them as well. The point is to make this all easy to digest and also easy to find and online and all these good things. So, but I have many things that I have to show you to make some of my points, and I have to try and be careful here to measure how much I go into a tangent. But suffice it to say, even though this stream is also on YouTube, there will be another video that we'll post about this stream that will be all the clips in order, so that there's a little bit more of a topic thread through the video, and we can better understand it. So through the stream, it'll be quite a little bit jumbled and chaotic, but I will always try to come back to the point. The point of this stream is to find out who the Celts are. Were, doesn't matter. And the first problem that I detected here is this, that they are identified by their use of Celtic languages and other cultural similarities. So Celts are identified by their use of Celtic languages and other cultural similarities. Let's think of these languages for a moment. Were the Gauls because they spoke Gaelic? Or is it that they spoke Gaelic because they were Gauls first? Let's see if there's an easier example here. The Romans, of course, right, called their language lingua latina, right? They called it the Latin language. And sometimes they could also say Latine with an E in the end, and then they wouldn't say lingua. And the point is, in both ways that they refer to their own language, they never said the Roman language. They said always the Latin language. That's because, you know, where these original Romans are from, the Latium, Latium. Let's find the Latium here. There you go, the Latium. And where is it on the map? It's right, central Italy, but they don't have it in here. That's nice. Well, it is this place, but Rome is here. And there you go. This is the Latium. These Romans came from this place. The first tribes from this place were the Latini, sometimes known as Latials or Latians. And their language, Latin, belonged to the Italic branch. Okay, so it was these people who named the languages. We haven't found this yet here as a properly written out fact. It was named after Rome. What does it say here on this view? Romulus? No, this is just a place. Genetic cluster here. All right. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that the Romans, they took the name Latin languages not from Rome or Romans, but from these Latini, who then named the language. We have to suppose here, but we'll find this fact. And then the Romans simply continued referring to that language as Latina or Latine, because it came from the Latini. And if the language Latin, we can try to surmise here, had named the Latini, then why wouldn't it have named the Romans, for instance? This is a point that I'm making here because I'm lacking someone precisely saying that the Latini named their language and not vice versa. Let me see another example here. If I have one that could show that point. Let me see if I ask ChatGPT. Maybe it'll help me here. But I'm going to do this on another, so you're not going to be able to see it. And I might bring it up later. It doesn't matter for now. But I will ask it here. What is the quickest way to make the point, as I believe James Collis made in one of his lectures, that languages are named after people and not vice versa. Let's see what it says. Says the quickest, cleanest way to make the point is peoples name themselves first. The languages are later named after those people by outsiders or scholars. No human group ever woke up speaking a language before being a people. Yeah, so that is like a pure temporal logic. Sure. If you want it even punchier, languages don't create peoples, people create languages. Yeah, sure. Names like Celtic, Germanic, or Italic are retrospective labels, not original identities. So you see, it's already going against what Wikipedia says here about the Celts. Because it says, I'm going to tell ChatGPT this. So Wikipedia starts its Celts article by saying they are identified by their use of Celtic languages and Celtic culture. But isn't this necessarily backwards? I always misspell languages. One moment. But isn't this necessarily backwards? And Wikipedia starts its Celts article. I was going to say, is this really the best we can do about an introduction on a public encyclopedia? Yes, it is backwards conceptually, ChatGPT says. It confuses descriptive scholarly criteria with historical causation. The clean way to say it is, scholars today identify Celts by language and material culture, but historically those languages and cultures existed because certain peoples already existed. This is the part that I really want to get to now, because these people already existed. It's interesting that nowadays I see a lot of people online that are very sure to say that the Celts are these people who speak Celtic languages or spoke them. But that raises the question, right? Why were they named Celtic? You see, I see very few people asking this. Why are they named Celtic then? Is it because Celtiberians? So wouldn't they be Celtiberian languages, or did they cut the Celtiberian? Or where did it come from? And they never come out and tell you this. It should be here on the first paragraph. Let's see how it continues. In other cultural similarities, major Celtic groups, okay, include these. The interrelationships of ethnicity, language, and culture are unclear and debated. Okay, well, even if they are debated, there's still a causation that caused the Celtic languages to be called Celtic, right? And I happen to know why these languages are called Celtic. And this is where it starts, where the whole argument might be out of order that I'm making it. So that's why I'm going to cut it eventually, probably, and put it on YouTube so that it makes more sense in order. But right now, what is it that we're doing? The first question, the question about this whole episode is, who are these Celts? And what we're doing now is we're trying to find out why is it that they're called the Celtic languages. Let's see if I click it. I'm going to make a search here because I already know who it was, so it doesn't have Buchanan here. So it's only going to have... okay. And it says the term Celtic was first used to describe this language group by Edward Lewid in 1707 following Paul-Yves Bezeron, who made the explicit link between the Celts described by classical writers and the Welsh and Breton languages. No. Almost. This is like the second and third steps, but there's not a first step here. Because, for instance, again, it says, the term Celtic was first used to describe this language group, which doesn't matter here what it is, by Edward Lewid in 1707. Okay, so why is it that he names them the Celtic languages? It doesn't explain here. And there's no, naming, etymology, there's nothing. So, I suppose, I apologize for the sirens. And I should take this moment to verify that everything is broadcasting correctly. One moment, please. And we're going to check here on my end, so we're not gonna hear anything. So it seems to be working fine on YouTube. Going to check Twitch now. And Twitch seems to be working fine. And so we're going to continue here. Now, not a lot of this stream is prepared, ladies and gentlemen. I think you have realized. But I do have some papers that I want to go over, that they are reserved here in some notes that I have. But I wanted to make this point first because I always like to start from the very beginning. And I don't want to be saying Celts and not justify why is it that we're saying Celts, okay? Because now we started just reading the generic article about Celts, okay, on Wikipedia, and then it directed us to Celtic languages. So that's why we're here now, okay? And then it starts saying that Lewid named this group Celtic. Well, but it doesn't say why. Now, I happen to know it wasn't Lewid. I mean, Lewid did name this whole branch Celtic language, that is true. But someone named half of this branch Celtic languages first, before him, some 120 odd years before him. And that was George Buchanan. Now, I know that this resource is actually on Google Books, but it's very hard to read there. because it's like almost like a vellum, and then ink over vellum, and it's got like a super different style to it, so it's very hard to read. So let me see if I can find this fact online, and it should have these tokens in it to have the right information. This almost has it, I think. Let me see here. This could be just this. I'm searching because I know that it came from these people. And I know it was by George Buchanan. And I know where it is in Google Books, but it's very hard to read there. This is something else, I suppose. This is in current scholarship. So Celticist Patrick Sims Williams, who will be very perennially referred to in this broadcast, because he's constantly being referred to by his papers, and also he has a pivotal paper that ends the discussion that the Hallstatt people were necessarily all the Celts. Let me put it that way. But we'll come back to this. But it says, in current scholarship, which this is already a very narrow usage of it, Celt is primarily a linguistic label. So that's good, because we're still trying to find out where this came from. And once again, I know where it came from, but I'm trying to find not an original source, but someone reporting on it. But I suppose it's because it's not a very well-known and well-chronicled fact. And I suppose Google has ignored one of the... Let me see if I just say... This could be talking about it. Yeah, this is the correct story. Pre-Roman, no, that's not correct though. And so you see, this gives the story in the correct order. It says, the origins of Scotland being called Celtic are found not in the archaeology of the Iron Age, which is very true, another point here that we'll have to echo through the stream, nor classical texts, but rather in 16th century, that means the 1500s. Oh, that's why I wrote it incorrectly. Oh, I did. It says that in 1582, George Buchanan, a Gaelic speaker, labeled the language group of Scotland, Ireland, and Spain, and this is the story here. The story is inside of this word, but we'll see if we can get to it from here. I don't think we can, because it doesn't mention the Celtic. So it says labeled the language group of Scotland, Ireland, and Spain, Celtic. So as you can see, this is why I'm saying Wikipedia is correct when it says that the current branch, linguistic branch, one of the 12 daughter branches of Proto-Indo-European, or PIE. One of the 12 is called the Celtic languages. That indeed was named by Edward Lewitt. But partially, the ones that are sometimes today known as Q Celtic, they were identified first by George Buchanan in 1582. And he said a label here on this page, it says a label taken from the classical texts to make the point that these languages were older than Latin. And so this we have to join. It's not joining for us, but if only we would join these two parts. This label, George Buchanan, where did he take it from? Where did he take the word Celtic from to name this group? Because it's still not very well explained here. in the parts I'm highlighting, if we could go inside it, as we're trying to do here with Google's help, we would see the story. The story is about a group of people called the Celtic, which somehow Google is still ignoring. Did it say that it couldn't find it? Oh, it's not searching for what I searched for. Okay, so it might not have done that before. Right, it is in this text here. This paper might have it, because it reveals some other key information. That it was in this tome. We'll wait for this to load. Okay, 426 pages, that's nice. Help me out. Exactly. 1582. We're going to search for Celtic. I don't think this is even done loading. While it loads, we'll continue searching here. I think it would also show up like this. This could have it. No, close. No. Let's see if I can find the original. And then if only I were lucky enough to find in the excerpt here the passage I'm looking for. Oh, this is interesting. It might have the fact that we want. That Greeks had understood. Thus from the Celti or Celtiberi, the people known as Celtic were descended. Okay. Throughout his discussion, Buchanan reserved much of his venom for the Welsh antiquarian Humphrey Lloyd, or Lloyd, whom he, I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced, whom he accused of constantly preferring barbarism to refinement. In Buchanan's view, overpopulation in the homelands of Gaul, in earlier times a term much wider geographic application than it was in Caesar's day, forced the Celts to migrate to neighboring lands. He used Celt in the same sense, well, but it still doesn't say that that's where he got it from. It's very close. The people known as Celtic were descended. In another passage he noted, the Irish and the colonies sent from them, having sprung from the Celtic inhabitants of Spain, very probably used the Celtic language. This is very close to what I'm talking about, but it still doesn't say that it came from the Celtic, but this is very close. So once again, the point that this book is making is that, but it's not making it very convincingly. Thus from the Celti or Celtiberi, the people known as the Celtic were descended. In another passage, he noted that the Irish and the colonies, he here is George Buchanan. He noted that the Irish and the colonies sent from them, having sprung from the Celtic inhabitants of Spain, very probably used the Celtic languages. So here it's missing why is it that these inhabitants in Spain were Celtic, which it's the most important part here. So let's see here. Because I keep finding he does have some passages. I want to find this in the middle of some English text. So then it would be of Spain, maybe. Let's see here. And wasn't there a page in between that showed you all the matches in the book? That is in Latin. I can't remember if his whole book is in Latin. Let me find from my notes here. And you're not going to see this, so it would be so I have a passage here, and then let me see if I can try and find it from there. For at first the Celtic and the Belga used different dialects, Strabo thinks. Afterwards the Celtics and about colonies to declare. Yeah, that is the part that I want to find. Let me see if I can copy and paste this. I should be able to. And one moment, I have to transfer things between computers. That's it. So let's go to this place. Yes, there we go. And so here we are reading History of Scotland by George Buchanan, 1582. And let me take a brief moment here to control the temperature in this place. One moment. All right, we're back. So it says here, no wonder if a language, but it already had different dialects. Let's see where it starts here. So let's start this excerpt from this place over here that I'm grabbing it from. For at first, the A. Celtai and the B. Belgai did use a different dialect, as Strabo thinks, or Strabo. Afterwards, when the Celtai sent abroad great colonies into Spain, as the names of Celtiberi and Celtici, or Celtiberi and Celtici, do declare, he puts a period here. I'm going to take advantage of this. But probably he means a comma here. But the point is this. He is very aptly, we'll see soon with one of the papers that I want to show you, very aptly identifying the whole, but it doesn't show here on this work. But I promise you, okay? So identifying the whole of these Celtic speakers as these two groups, the Celtai and the Belgai, So basically, they would be south and north of Western Europe. We'll see this again soon. And it says that they probably spoke different dialects. And then it says that afterwards, when these Celtai, whom he identified as being, it's not clear here, but of course, probably in southern Gaul, because of course he's making the distinction, the contraposition with the Belgae, whom we know to be in northern Gaul. Okay, so he's starting this discussion with the Celtai of southern Gaul. And then he says, afterwards, when the Celtai sent abroad great colonies into Spain, as the names of Celtiberi and Celtici do declare. So let's stop here, because this is interesting, because he never says that the Celtai do declare their name. He has to suppose that the Celtai went to Spain, and then finally we got this documented name. It's because, as probably everyone watching this stream knows, Gaul was, as a whole, divided in three parts, right? Omnia Gallia, what was it? Divisa est in partes tres, something like that. And then he goes on to say, Caesar goes on to say that these Gauls from Gallia Lugdunensis, it doesn't say it like that in the passage, but those are the ones he's talking about, that these Gauls called themselves Celtai. That's what he tells us, but that is not do declare. That's not them declaring their own name to us. So this author, George Buchanan, he very cleverly starts with what is well known, that probably didn't he mention, probably he mentioned this earlier, that these people were the people who Julius Caesar told us that they call themselves Celts, okay? And then he traces them as migrating to Spain and leaving there their declared names of Celtiberi and Celtici. It is from here that I do argue that the Celtic languages were named. It is in this work that he's taking, George Buchanan, he's taking very great care to show where he got this name from and where it was documented in the Celtiberi and the Celtici. So as much as his theory starts out with the Celtai, because they are not the ones who document this name, after all, if they had been, he wouldn't have to show this movement of peoples. And by the way, he then does show some movement of peoples from the Belgae to the British Isles. Let me read that and then I will make another point. And the Belgae made their descent into the maritime parts of Britain, as may be collected from the names of C. Venta Belgarum, of the Atrebates, and E. Iceni. It must needs follow that on the one side the Spaniards, and on the other the Romans, the English, the Danes, and the Normans, must bring in many strange words with them, and so corrupt the country speech. This is basically the rest of the point that he's making here about language. Now, to us, what matters is the tracing. For instance, again here with the Belgae, which I'm not sure that we have them calling themselves Belgae in a way that is documented, but he then again does the exact same strategy as he did for Celtai to Celtici, and he goes on to the Venta Belgarum, which is for sure documented. We know this from themselves. They wrote that there, in situ, where they're from. This is not some Roman saying, oh, Venta Belgarum. No, this is a place in Britain that called itself that, with like a plaque or some sort of a sign. And then we found that there, okay? And so I'm going to check that later, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I'm going to double check. I'm going to write here to remember. Venta Belgarum, double check that this name is found in Britain. Actually, let's go ahead and quickly ask outside of the screen here. Ask ChatGPT. Let's see what it says, because I'm pretty sure I'm correct about that. So basically I'm asking that name, Venta Belgarum, where is it documented? Is it documented in Britain? Is it from a Greek Roman chronicler? How do we know this name from? From what document? It says it is documented for Roman Britain, and we know the name from Roman itineraries, not from a Greek narrative historian, and not from local British inscriptions. Oh, that's not then. Okay, so I was wrong. Venta Belgarum is the name modern of Winchester. Okay, so how do we know this name? Only from Roman administrative geographical documents. Oh, okay. So, but it is an administrative document. Okay. So hold on a second. This is the primary and earliest secure source. Antonine itinerary lists road stations and distances. Okay. That's why I was associating it with calling it actually a place. It includes Venta Belgarum as a stop on the road network of southern Britain. This is a bureaucratic road list. Okay. So it's as close as we'll get, but I was wrong. It's not documented in situ. This is documented from the chroniclers, from the Greco-Roman chroniclers. So, yes, Venta Belgarum is documented in Britain. No, it does not come from a Greek historian. Venta is a Briton. Yeah, now we know that. So the structure, something important, exactly the kind of Belgarum. Okay, so this is not documented in situ. Fair enough. And so he can't get as close to what he did for Keltai and Celtici, because the Celtici, their name is both documented in Greco-Roman chroniclers and in situ, as I can show later very easily. And that I know for sure. We could go to websites like the epigraphic database of Spain, for instance. And also there's a German one, I forgot the name, EDH, I believe. We'll go there later. So anyways, but the point is he's trying to trace, and this is a good source to mention, because again, it comes from these Roman itineraries, and it's a bureaucratic document. So basically they were just listing place names in what we would hope would be the least politically biased way from documents that we could hope for, which is just a bureaucratic document. So most likely this name, of course, most probably was used in that place as Venta Belgarum. And so the point I'm trying to make is he starts from these originals, the Celtai and the Belgae in Gaul, for which we do not have direct attestation of their names. And then he traces them outside of Gaul to places where they migrated to, where they did document their name on site, to the best of our evidence. Okay? So I submit to you that this is his basic thinking, his foundational thinking for naming these languages, the Scottish, the Irish, and what the Spanish spoke during ancient Roman times, to name them Celtic. This is the foundation of his thinking. He found this name, and he found that it was documented. And he even mentions the Celtici. He mentions other groups as well, even in Lusitania. So he's very knowledgeable about the usage of this term in Spain. And he never mentions the use of this term in Gaul outside of the Celtai, for which again we do not have direct documentation. This is again reference to Julius Caesar of his commentary on the Gallic War. So he's not claiming that there's direct evidence that they call themselves Celtai here, as he is here when he says the names of the Celtiberi and the Celtici do declare. And also, even if we didn't have place evidence, in place evidence of these, in situ evidence of these two names, which we do in inscriptions. The fact that they were names of tribes, as he's saying here, the names of the Celtiberi and the Celtic do declare, also then forces us to fall back on this thinking that it was probably not politically motivated and hence not distorted. And also, as they documented those names. And also we have people like Herodotus, but also Strabo and Siculus, who are, I'm not going to say less political, but they were not politicians. And so they were trying to do an ethnography of these peoples, and so they had more motivation to get these names right. And we do know that those were the names that they had, the Celtiberi and the Celtici. This is not doubted today in academia or otherwise. And so I'm going to consider that this is good enough. I don't think that there is an actual passage that says that therefore he's naming the Celtic languages. There might be, but I probably missed it if it does exist. But and then we can come back to it if it does exist and I end up finding it. But this is as close as we're going to get. And so he's the first to use the term Celtic languages before Lluid. And here he is telling you how he knows that this name was documented. I'm going to just double check some of my notes here to make sure that I don't miss a layup here. A Celtic key. Yeah, I should actually search for that in my notes. I know you can't see it. Celtic key. No. So yeah, this is as good as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just read this note here on the side. The Celts were a numerous people inhabiting principally about Lyon, from whom one part of France was called Gallia Celtica. Yes, the Ludonenses. Inhabitants, oh, this is notes that he's making, okay. Inhabitants of Belgium, now the Low Countries or the Netherlands. In Caesar's time, counted a third part of France by the name of Gallia Belgica. Okay, but he doesn't mention anything more about the Celtic here. Okay, fair enough. So this, because the first mention, or the creation really, the coining of the term, the phrase Celtic languages, is from this document, George Buchanan's History of Scotland, from 1582. And because he does recognize that the names of these Celts in Spain that came from, in his theory, southern Gaul, that these Celts in Spain did declare their names as Celtiberi and Celtici, therefore using this root Celtic or Celti. That's why he then named some of these languages Celtic languages. Let's see if we can do a search here and find where he says Celtic languages, if he does do so. It says no results, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, because this is not necessarily properly OCR'd. Is it going to show me? See, it doesn't think that there are results for Celtic. Let me see what else he says here. Yea, I rather judge it more worthy of admiration that the languages of neighboring nations, having been adulterated, okay, counties of Britain is no different than the whole language. So here he's making the case for calling also the languages that are in Britain Celtic, because he's saying that they mustn't be too different. For in any of them, though of other nations, to hear men speak British, the sound of his own language, understand. Okay, looking to see if he calls, if he says something about the Celtic here again. Gauls, tribes of Gauls, Gallic Shore, Belgic tongue. Okay, so look at this. I suppose that these nations returning, as it were, from a long pilgrimage and possessing themselves of the neighbor seats and almost coalescing into one people did confound the idioms of their several tongues respectively, so that it was neither wholly Belgic nor wholly Celtic, nor yet wholly unlike to either of them. So check this out. This is also, it gets closer and closer to the point that I'm making. Remember before how he implicitly was talking about Gaul and he took them to be two groups. He is simply talking about two language groups. We're going to see that later on they are really genetic groups, but that probably and likely means that they were also different language groups. And then he's also taking from the fact that I suppose Julius Caesar, in his commentary of the Gallic War, if I remember correctly, did say that the Belgae spoke some different tongue. And so, oh, this is good. Look at this. It's right before where I read. Let me start it a little bit earlier. Let me start over here. I am easily induced to believe. Well, maybe this was from the previous part. Doesn't matter. That before the coming in of the Saxons, all the Britons used a language. He spells it differently. Used a language. So all the Britons used a language not much different from each other. And it is probable that the nations adjoining to the Gallic shore used the Belgic tongue, from whose limits a good part of the Britons bordering on France had made a transmigration, as Caesar informs us. But the Irish and the colonies sent from them, being derived from the Celtae, inhabitants of Spain, 'tis probable they spake the Celtic tongue. And then the rest that I should read now. I suppose that these nations, returning as it were from a long pilgrimage, and possessing themselves of the neighbor seats, and almost coalescing into one people, and possessing them of their of the neighbor seats, I suppose is what he means, and almost coalescing into one people, did confound the idioms of their several tongues respectively, so that it was neither wholly Belgic nor wholly Celtic. So here he's making the point that in his opinion, and he's naming these for the first time, roughly the Brythonic languages, he would be calling them Belgic, and roughly the Gaelic languages, he would be calling them Celtic. So he makes this differentiation between Belgic and Celtic in terms of language here for the first time. And he says in the same sentence, in the very same sentence where he names Irish Celtic tongue, he says, being derived from the Celtae, inhabitants of Spain. So he's not even any longer talking about the Celtae of Gaul, if he ever was. Remember that we adduced that from his contraposition between the Celtae and the Belgae. But I'm not sure that he actually meant these Celtae from southern Gaul now anymore, because he's now saying, but the Irish and the colonies sent from them, being derived, and the colonies are probably the Scottish, being derived from the Celtae, inhabitants of Spain, 'tis probable they spake the Celtic tongue. Spoke, of course, right, is what he means. 'Tis probable they spake the Celtic tongue. So, and I suppose that this 'tis probable is for the rest. It's not for inhabitants of Spain. It's for the second part. So the intonation would be, but the Irish and the colonies sent from them, being derived from the Celtae, inhabitants of Spain, 'tis probable they spake the Celtic tongue. So he's making the point here for the first time that these Irish, he will name these tongues Celtic because they came from these Celtae, the inhabitants of Spain, through which the names Celtiberi and Celtici do declare their existence. Okay? And so now we're finally done with that point. I'm going to see if I can save this for future reference, but I'm not sure that it understands that when I switch pages, I go somewhere else, and I should have another URL. So we'll just hope that it is true. There's no way to take a link to this. Link to this result. Well, it's not the result that I want. I just want the page. Link to this result. What is a link? Let's take it and save it. Alright, that looks better. And let's take this out of the way. Dismiss. Alright. So the point that I wanted to make has been made, that Wikipedia does not make. And it's all too bad, because it could just simply take this very sentence here. It's quite short, and it makes the entire point. The point being, once again, the entire reason why we talk about Celtic languages, and hence from that Celtic culture and Celtic everything today, is because foundationally it was George Buchanan who, for the first time in the history of Scotland, his tome, his book that he published in 1582, used and coined the phrase Celtic tongue to talk about Irish, because he supposes that it's very probable that they spoke this Celtic language derived from the Celti of Spain, okay, who did declare their names as Celtiberi and Celtici, as he says on another sentence, a little bit above where we are right now. Previous page, I believe. Yes, here. As the names of the Celtiberi and the Celtici do declare that the Celti sent abroad great colonies into Spain. Well, yeah, of course that he must be talking about the Celti of Gauls, because after all, they sent abroad colonies into Spain. So these cannot be the Celti of Spain. But that's at first when he was talking about these movements. But then at this point, he does seem to talk about Celti of Spain. Okay, we will see later that there were Celti, but then with an I at the end instead of with this AE, which here it's like an AE ligature, or an ash, I suppose. We will see later that there were Celti with an I at the end in Iberia, okay, in Western Iberia. We'll see that later. I'll write it down here so I don't forget. Show there were Celti in Western Spain. I think there's a search that I can do to find that quickly. Hold on. Maybe this. There is a picture that they have. Let me see if I can find it again. But probably the name of it will be this. Let me see if I can find it. Well, I know I'm close. Why is Google making this so hard for me? It's really easy. All right. There we go. What is this called, this map? It's not this question, is it? But this is the map I was searching for. And then they have another version. Oh, this is it. There we go. Found the maps. I had to write Lusitania map. And let me just make sure. What is this? Not Kelt. Facebook is amazing. Actually, it might be interesting to see what they have to say about this. But he's citing the very peoples who, yeah, but yeah, only the Grovi are taken out as exceptions, so I can prove this statement with this passage. This is not correctly translated, so you can see their level here. But a lot of scholars incorrectly translate this too, and we'll look into this later. Came from the banks of yeah. So what's his main point? These all argue against him, right? So he's just hoping that people will read this and then be convinced by what is said. And also, let's see here. Who says not Celts? Belonging to Indo-European but not Celtic. They have traditionally been classified with regard. Traditionally been classified. Okay. How traditionally? Back to the Iron Age? No. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about when they identified themselves. We don't care about what Tovar has to say at the moment. And so, see, nobody actually says not Celts. Nobody says not anything here. This is the Tartessians, so not related. Okay. Yeah, so it doesn't say what it purports to say, so it's just fake. All right, so then let's go back to the pages that we were trying to find. Here we go. Yes, exactly. With two others, yes. So this is a collage, so it's an aggregation that someone made. Because the Epigraphische Datenbank, the epigraphic database, I believe that they are German. They don't do this for you. They only do this for you one at a time. And so if you find one epigraphic evidence, usually a tombstone or some commemoration tablet or something like that, then it puts it into the map, puts it on the map. But it doesn't put all on the map that you want. At least I haven't seen that function. So this is distribution of places where there were found these epigraphic monuments containing the following names: Celtius, Celtiatus, Conceltus, and Arceltus, according to the data from the Epigraphische Datenbank. So these names, they're not usually written with the suffix US. We don't usually find it that way, and I can show you that later. Probably I could show you now. Let me see here. Spain, what is it called? EDB? BIA? Yes, the epigraphic Spanish database. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, ADB. I was one off. EDA. All right. And if I search here, we'll do advanced search. And yeah, we do need the image. The inscription itself. Wait, hold on. Didn't allow me to do it. Is this not how you do it? I think. Let me switch languages here. Give me an advantage. No, it doesn't switch for this. Lovely. There we go. And material. Keywords. Inscription type. If it doesn't put it in inscription, then title maybe? No, there's something about the search. It's not taking the what I wrote is not here. Oh, it is. Let me just search here. No, but it doesn't find what I'm looking for. This search. Maybe this is what I wanted. Here we go. Maybe. No, it's still giving me this bad search. I know that they were offline for a while, and then they had to come back. And so the search might not be working. See, I'm getting all of them. 1276 pages. Let me just try once again and then try to understand it. What could be happening here? You know what? Let me see if I have a saved search from that, because I might have it. And I think there's another document there that I might have this in. Try to open this here. Interesting. It is not here. Yeah, I don't have it, and this is not searching it right now. Let's go to the Epigraphische Datenbank. But I don't remember that they have Or they might, let me see. Zuha. And then, oh, now it's in English. Text. So it didn't used to work this way. It's completely different from my experience. It's very interesting. But you can see that most of the results are from Lusitania and Hispania, as you can see, right? Lusitania. Oh, we can just click on it and it shows us. Let me try to find one with a image. Oh, but by the way, you can see right here that although it does have the US suffix for the previous name, it does not have it for this, for the Keltai. And this, even though they separated the syllables, they didn't put a suffix that they put for the previous. Again, the same situation. I really want to find one that has the image itself. Celtiberia. So those names are tested in this place, as I was saying, right? Celtiberia is attested in place, right? Where is this from? So from Spain. There you go, see. And then the name Celt is now all written out. That's I hadn't seen one like that in Lusitania. That's where the Celtius is found. So because Lusitania went a little bit east out of Portugal, because they were following the mines, the tin mines. And so this is written out. So they did write it out sometimes. Here it is again, written out. This is a famous one. This actually, I believe, should have the picture. Now this is abbreviated, even though there are some suffixes. So you see it's constantly abbreviated. This is also Lusitania. So this serves to give some, and we can even try to, how do I get out? Does this tell us which one has image? Oh yeah. So then, let me see this one. Oh, but this one is missing the T. And then it doesn't show here. This has the full name. But yeah, somehow their website is not showing. But this, you know, trust me for now, this is except the things in parentheses. This is what is written on the tablet that they found. So it's an inscription on a tombstone. And it's written out all this Celtiatus with this suffix, and then it's abbreviated this usual formula. Here lies, and then I don't know the rest. Hic situs est, sit tibi terra levis. Hic situs est is this person here lies. So est here is to put this in the past. And then may the earth be light. That's what it says here. Maybe that's the formula. May the earth be light on you who lies here. So I think that's what it is. But the point is not to translate that. The point was to find the image that I couldn't find here. There is a Wikipedia article that does have that image. And maybe I didn't write it. There we go. And I'm gonna come back to the images that we found, but I just want to show you. Oh, this doesn't have it. It was maybe this article itself would have it. No. It was the... Maybe this. Ah, here we go. This is a Galician Roman stele. Stele? How do you say this? I don't know. Is that how you even spell it? Stele. Stele. Oh, wow. Also steel. Okay. So Galician Roman, okay, what was it? Stele. We'll pronounce it Stele. A Galician Roman stele from Crescenti, Galicia, held at the end of the century, was dedicated to a deceased aristocrat called Apana from the Calaikian tribe of the Celtic Supertamarici, as can be read at the bottom of the stele itself. So this is what I wanted to show you. Unfortunately, it's very tiny here. So we can see Apana. We're gonna zoom in even more. Why are we saving the zoom here? There's no point. Oh, this is as much as we can zoom. Okay. So it says it's from Apana guy. Apana. From the Celtic, okay. And then it says here Apana, we can read, right? A-P-A-N-A. And then it goes on to say something else. And it says C-E-L-T-I-C. And I believe this could be another I. But at least spelled Celtic. And so this is what I was bringing up earlier with Buchanan, that he traces these Celti to the Celtic of Spain because they indeed call themselves Celtic in their own tombstones. Okay? This is not a Roman vellum with ink on top writing, oh, we bet that there are these people called Celtics in Iberia. That's not what this is. This is a tombstone that was found in Galicia, right? So this is these people calling themselves Celts. And then brings me back to the image that I was searching for. But before I do that, I'm just going to show you here that indeed there are very many, as you can see here on the side, all the appearances of it. There are many instances of these Celts documenting themselves in Lusitania. And usually, yes, we do have the Celtic there, but we do also have the Celtius, for instance, right? Which are the Celti simply without a suffix. I mean, the suffix is just to finish this, but it's not a semantic suffix, right? This is just to finish the word. And it's not like a Celtic key. So we have many suffixes in Lusitania. We have the Celtiatus. What else? Celti again. We can go back a few and it's going to be Lusitania. Province Lusitania. Celti. What is the next one? Celtiatis, right? Lusitania again. And Celtiatus in Lusitania. What else? Where is this one? Oh, because this is abbreviated. Mirabrigo Celtic. Okay, fair enough. But what else? I want to show you something though. This is also abbreviated. There's no way to say. Almost there. Okay. Let's see some of these. Celti completely. Of the military cohort of the Lusitanians. Found in Lusitania. So again, this is a Lusitanian who is we're being told is from the Lusitanian cohort. So he was conscripted or drafted to the military from out of Lusitania. And his last name is Celti. Okay. What else here? That's the one. Celtius. Again with the Any suffix. Celtus again. A few more. Lusitania. Keltai, okay. Without the US. And Keltai without the US. And Keltai without the US. Okay, all of these in Lusitania. We have more. And also, you know, even though we have all of these from Lusitania, here again, written out, Kelti, you know, consider that Baetica, the western part of Baetica is also Lusitania. And so these would also count, even though there's fewer. And now let's check out some of these from Gallia Narbonensis and so on. So this is a tombstone in Gallia Narbonensis. So we do find them in southern France as well. Okay. And let's check out all the Gallias in which this is found. Narbonensis, Narbonensis, Narbonensis. Okay, so it's only found in the southern part of Gaul, in that southern territory, province that they called Gallia Narbonensis, okay? And then it's found all over Iberia, like Hispania Quiterior, which is like, I suppose, more to the east, simply because it's... Oh, wow, now this is very west. Why is this Quiterior? Maybe Quiterior was the northern part, I'm not sure. So it finds it over the north, okay? And it finds it in Lusitania, plenty of them. Usually not Celtici, but usually the Celti. And which let's highlight the the Hispania here to see how many, just to get a glimpse. So quite a few. And we have 3 other pages. And we find some in Pannonia as well, Thracia, of course, but mainly we find them again in the southern Gaul and Aquitania. And so I think this is it documents the point quite well. Second page also Hispania, Lusitania again. We have some Germania that it shows up in Celtic. And Lugdunensis, so we're going a little bit north in Gaul. A few show up in Lugdunensis. There's one in Britannia. Interesting. A few more in Britannia. Oh, but these are the Romans writing it out. And let's see where it is here. Oh, it doesn't... oh, and plus it's about the Celtiberians. But also this is assumed. I'm not sure what this symbol means. I know that the parentheses is assumed, and so it's not written. But this symbol, I'm not sure what it means. This square bracket. I'm not sure if this isn't there, and then only the aurum is missing. I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think this might be like a flaw, maybe. I'm not sure. But this is all written out. It's there. So we know it is about the Celtiberians. What about the previous or the next? I believe it found them. Celtifilius. Oh, but that was in Lusitania. And this also without context. Okay, so clearly the majority are in Iberia. Even on the second page, and then let's go to the third page, which is the last one, and then Spain again, and then uncertain province. So basically, now you're ready to believe, and that because this was a authoritative website that documents all these epigraphic evidence, right? Now you're ready to believe these images that simply summarize the situation. And this is just about the ones that he listed here. The first one is this. Celtius, Celtiatus, which we saw some. We didn't see this, but I think because there's so few. And basically this is where they show up, okay? And this now, in this instance, he's narrowing it down to just, I suppose, where they show up in Iberia, because we saw some that show up as Celta and Celt in Britannia, the few of them. But basically, he's showing, I suppose, only the ones in Iberia, where they show up out of all of Iberia. Where do they show up, and where do they concentrate? where their locations concentrate, and it's basically in Western Iberia. We have these with these semantic suffixes like Celtiatus, right? We have the ones without the semantic suffix, just with the, I suppose, the adjective or the noun suffix, depending on what it is, for Celtius, and it appears all over where Lusitania, remember if we look at a tin map, Iberia, this is what the tin does. I mean, what it does, right? But you see how it, we'll try and make it big. You see how it goes east and then gets out of Portugal? You see? This is what the Celts were following. They were mining this tin. And so that's why they show up like this. Okay? Going to east a little bit and into this space here. Because this is where the tin is. I mean, that's a picture of the tin. Okay? That's another one. If it's going to show us. There we go. From a paper. That's where it is, you see. And so they were going east a little bit from what we now consider north of Portugal to follow this mining operation. And so that's why their names are here. That's where they show up. And this is an updated version. What is that they added? Celtianus. And I suppose that was all. And then somehow they highlighted our Celtus for some reason. Okay, and they found Celtianus here among the Celtius. Okay, that's where they all are. So that's mainly, we can say that the Celtius without the key, without the Celtic key suffix, and with these semantic suffixes like atus and anus, for instance, right? That add a little bit of another segment, another linguistic segment outside of just the US. That's what I mean by semantic suffix. The ones that are varying the suffix, that's where they show up. It's in Western Iberia, mainly in Lusitania in northern Portugal. Okay. And the ones that show up elsewhere, as we saw here, in Britannia, for instance, let's see how many in Britannia there are. They're basically stragglers, and some of them are talking about people not from there, right? So this is one of them. And let's see where this talks about Celtiberians too. So this is the second one we've seen out of the 7 that there are. Oh, hold on. Let's reset the search again. There are 4 of them, and 2 of them are about the Celtiberians. And this is from a Gaul. It could be someone from Asturias. And it is also from a Celtiberian, yeah. So at least 3 of them, it seems. Yeah, this was the other one that had it around here. Where was it? Yeah, over here. So 3 out of 4 are of Celtiberians in Britannia. And where's the one that isn't? Is it this? Yeah, this one we don't know where these Celts are from. Because we find so many that are from Celts from elsewhere, you know, if we were betting, this could probably also be at least from Gaul, right? This one is also without context, could be anything from anywhere. So 1, Celtiberia, 2, yeah, so it's 2 Celtiberians and 2 without context. So that doesn't mean much for Britannia using that name, and also it means that half of that usage there is from foreigners from Spain. And then, of course, we have already seen that the majority are from Western Iberia. We have stragglers everywhere, like in Austria, or on certain provinces, or Rome even, or Venice. But mainly they are over in even where the Etruscans are. We find one, but mainly they are in Western Iberia. Okay, so these ring true. They should be true. That's their location. So that's one of the first points here. To summarize it again, well, for the first time, the point that I've made first here is that the Celtic languages and everything that we call Celtic today, we call them that because of these Celtici from Spain. And then that's because Buchanan, George Buchanan in 1582 in his History of Scotland, coined that phrase Celtic languages, or Celtic tongue for him. And he said that the Irish and the Scottish and the Spanish spoke that language. And the Celtici from Spain, he also called them the Celti from Spain. And indeed, of course, these names, the ones that have suffixes, have to come after, at least time-wise, at least temporally, have to come after the ones with a simpler suffix, or just this, noun or adjective suffix. So that's why I came to the origin, because Celtici we can find everywhere in Iberia. Okay, but the ones that vary the suffix and the ones that show with the bare suffix, okay, with the most basic suffix, those are only found in Western Iberia, and those we would have to conclude are the places of origin of at least these people that call themselves Celts and all the Celtici in Iberia, because here it's where we find the most variance in these suffixes. And here I could make a point. Let me see if I can find this point to make. It's going to be in my other computer. Hold on. I think I can find this quickly. Searching for it. It was someone making the point about Illyrians. Why can't I find it here? And that's the whole point of this stream, ladies and gentlemen, is to force me to find these things and put them out there. How did I name this file? Let me see here if I can find this. I have to remember how I named the file. It was someone making the point that Illyrians can be told apart in Pannonia due to their variation of the suffixes, and we can know where they're from originally because of that. How does it not have Illyrian in the name? Oh, is it this? I think I found it. Yeah, I found it. So let me see how I'm going to transfer this. Oh, this is already in this computer. That's good. So then let me just open this on this browser. There we go. And now it should be showing up. So that didn't take too long. This is a book about Illyrian. I'm not sure exactly which book it is. That's something I should know, but I don't know from here. But it is a scholarly book, it's an academic book about the Illyrians. And when we get to this part, I think I'm gonna have to read all of it because I don't remember. I think it was over here. Oh yeah, integrated, exactly. So the point that it makes, we're going to skip basically to the heart of the point because that's also always what I'm trying to do in this stream. I don't want to hold back. It's the entire opposite of what I want to do, is hold back on what I want to show you. So check this out. But there is one essential difference between the Celtic and the North Adriatic names in the anthroponymy of ancient Ig. The latter, so the North Adriatic names, are much more integrated into derivational families than the former. Many North Adriatic names are derived from the same stems by different devices: Buca, Bukiku, Buko, Bukiu, Bukirega, or Ena, Enia, Eno, Enico, Enignus, Enina, or Lasso, Lassaio, Lascontia, or Voltanis, Voltarenis, Voltaron, Voltaront, Voltaronitia, Voltarotia, Voltia, Voltielus, Voltilius, Voltognas, Voltrex, Voltuparis. This means that the North Adriatic names are better integrated into the onomastic system of ancient Ig and can therefore be regarded as its original component. And so the point that he's making is that because we find these same stems with very many different suffixes like this, this means that these names are better integrated into the onomastic system, that's just the naming system of ancient Ig, and can therefore be regarded as its original component. And so basically he's giving us a formula here, a paradigm, right? He's giving us a model. Wherever we find these repeating stems with varying suffixes, that place can therefore be regarded as the original component of the onomastic system. Okay. So once again, it's in Western Iberia that we find Celtiatus and Celtianus, right? And the original one as well, Celtius. It's in Western Iberia that we find them. We saw Britannia that they don't have, any with different suffixes, and the ones that they do have with different suffixes are from foreigners from Celta-Iberia, right? And I don't think we saw any from the Gauls. How did they say Gaul here? Maybe we don't have one on this page. Well, there's a Belgica there. Let's see how they have it. Just no context, but also no variation in the suffix. And let's see some more of the... Oh, Celtus, okay. There you go. So only these bare ones that are found mainly in Lusitania. And they're stamped. These are stamps, right? Fecit is usually in a stamp. These are from things that are made or fabricated, manufactured, right? These are also stamps. So these are just objects that were found that had something stamped on them to say who is it that fabricated them. So possibly they were fabricated by Lusitanians and they were found in Belgium. And let's see here on the first page. There were a few with Gallia. How is it that they wrote it? Yeah, Narbonensis. Celtila. This is just the one that they had originally. It was the name of the son of Vercingetorix. Was that who was? It's specific as the father. Oh, okay, so no, he was the father of Vercingetorix, Celtulus. So because this suffix occurred in Gaul, at least I'm not sure if we had tested this original one, Vercingetorix's father. Nevertheless, the Greco-Romans did tell us about it, because it is therefore original, or at least in use in Gaul. Then that's why they used it for in attested ways for their own, common people, as it were. All right, and so this is just one suffix that is already theirs, and so shouldn't count for saying that they did have very many suffixes. This is indeed another one, Celtonis. It's a different suffix. This is the same. And then, where's this one? Without a suffix. So this Southern Gaul does have some two different suffixes, and then they have the bare suffixes. And Celtilius, this is indeed another one. Now, so we do have all these suffixes varying in Western Iberia and in Southern Gaul. Let me find out one thing here. I want to check this before. So the places where these are found are usually in Narbo and Massilia, I suppose, or at least those were the centers, and we can suppose that they came from there. And these were both not original Celtic cities. It seems that Massilia was originally a Greek colony, a Phocaean colony, and then Narbo was originally a Roman colony. So we don't really know who are all the Celts that migrated there. There weren't necessarily only Gauls that migrated south, if you could think that way, right, to those Narbo and Massilia cities. But very likely there were also these Iberian Celts who migrated there, because their names are so similar, although we don't find the Celtili and the Celtilius. The Celtonis, I think, does exist. We just haven't come across it, but I think it does exist. But also the Hispanic epigraphic online is not working. Hispania epigraphica is not working, so I can't verify there. There is a PDF. If we search for some of these, we don't need the commas. We will find maybe I'm abbreviating too much. Oh, here we go. let me see if I can find this, because I have it here. Ah, there we go. And then I'm going to open this in the browser. All right, that's the paper. So the paper is called Celtic and Celtiberian in the Iberian Peninsula. Let's go to the meat of it. So these are some that are found. This is an important paragraph, actually. Let's read this. I'm going to zoom in first. The epigraphic sources show that the usage is the same as we found in Latin writers. This is the usage of these names. It must also be significant. And so basically the point of this sentence is to say that they're referring to the same people as the Latin writers were referring to. It's not a coincidence that they have the name Celts, okay? It must also be significant that of the approximately 25 occurrences, this is at the time of that publication, there are more, that of the approximately 25 occurrences of the name Celtius in Hispania, all of them come from Lusitania, excepting one from Navarre. Okay, so all of them but one come from Lusitania, and this is the most original way to write it because it doesn't have a suffix. Once again, to overly explain this, I know that US is a suffix. I'm talking about these other composing suffixes that they use, like here. This en, I would say, is like, you know, composing it, right? This at is composing it, right? This other at here, this oh no, this not this one. So, and we'll see a few more in this paper. All the occurrences of other names from the stem Celt, such as Celtianus, Celtiatus, Celtiatis, are Celtius, Conceltius. So this is not even just with suffix, but with prefix. That's how much variation Lusitania has. Come from Western Hispania too. Okay, and so again, going back to the point that this Illyrian paper makes, that makes it so that we can regard this as the original component of the onomastic system of this place. Okay, the original component there is Celts, and it's original to this place because it finds itself expressed with so many different suffixes. Okay, and they're not listing all suffixes here. They say etc. for a reason. Let me see if I can find another one here. Oh, it's right next to so see, this is another one that has a gun, for instance, Celtigun. And let me see if there used to be a list of these. Let me see if I can find this list. I also have it here as a PDF somewhere. Let me see if this is the one. No. It's interesting because I don't fully remember what the paper should be. I thought it was this name. But there's one with a whole list of them. Let me search for the other name. That way I think I'll be able to find it. I think this is it. No. It's very close, but it's not. That's interesting because this search used to find it. Oh, that's the name of the paper. Okay, hold on. One moment, folks. I should have it. But this seems to be the paper, but of course, as you can see, it's so unavailable. But I do have it somewhere. I just didn't name the PDF that way. I think I found it. Yes. And, I'm gonna have to transfer this somehow. Right. Let's go ahead and take a very small break while I transfer this so I can show this to you. And we will be right back. All right, we're back. That wasn't so bad. All right. So I guess just make sure that this is showing correctly. I want to make sure of something here. So this is showing cut up a little bit, now that I realize. Yeah, so I'll write down what wasn't visible before, and then I'll redo it later. Let me make sure I can fix this problem for now. Or maybe I can just make the whole thing smaller. Like this. Almost everything shows up now. Let's see now. All right. Interesting. And then I suppose we can center this. Oh no, that doesn't work. Okay, that's how it is. Yeah, no, it is centered. All right. All right. All right, folks. I apologize about that. Maybe you weren't seeing everything that I was showing you. Although these might have shown up, right? Because they were on the left. Those were the maps that I was showing you. This was the Epic Fish Datenbank. And this was the one that wasn't working. And then this was the location of tin in Iberia. This is it, where the tin is. Once again, that's why the names go a little bit east. All right, and I can see that my cursor also doesn't show, so you can never see where I am. That is nice. All right, and so what is next here for us? This PDF that I wanted to show you. If I just search here just so I can quickly go to it. So this is basically the search results of the Hispania Epigraphica that wouldn't work there now. And someone put it in paper format so we can see how, you know, many of each, for instance, or whatever you want to do. And we would have to probably cut this in half, more or less, because as you see, it repeats from one column to another, but not always. So it's not very convenient to estimate from this number. But let me see here. If we go through the results, you can see that it appears several times, and they're all in Portugal and Western Iberia. And we have several other different suffixes. So we have this GUN suffix, appears several times. Which other one? Since it doesn't tell us, Keltiatiki, I believe there is one like that. Yeah, so you see, this one has two suffixes before the normal one, right? It has the AT and then the IC. So it's Keltiaticus. Keltiaticus, that's what it is. Appears about maybe 7 times. Yeah, 6 times. What other ones? Keltiaticus, Keltiat. The ones that start with Keltiat are Keltiatis, Keltiaticus, and Keltiatus. So with an I and with a U afterwards. So it has more variation than in Southern Gaul. And also has much more in quantity than Southern Gaul. If we just look at the results for CELT, again, we can't just go by this number because it repeats in the 2 columns, but you can see that there are very many of them. Let's see if we are counting text, which we shouldn't, but let's start before. This is all just tables, ladies and gentlemen, and so really all these matches, if we start from here, see, there's only 19 before this whole table. So we'll discount 20, and after the whole table, we'll go through it a little bit so you can see. Celtiberus, Celtius, Celtiatus. What was the other one? Celtiatus. There was one with an O. Celtio. That's interesting. Which, by the way, this one would be the one with an N. When it has an O like this, then the suffix is actually an N. Celtio is actually Celtion, but then it only shows up when you're declining it. Okay, when you're doing the declension of it. And so, so the Celtionis that we saw in Gaul also appears here in Iberia. But we'll search for it explicitly after I show you some of these. These are the Are Celti and the Con Celti showing up. More Celtius, that's the majority of them. And if we go after the table finishes, there's no more text. Yeah. So basically, 371 minus 19 from before the table, right? So that gives us 352, right? And so 352, but it shows up in 2 columns. Let's just divide by half. 352. That's 176, right? If I'm not mistaken. And so 176 times that Celt shows up in Western Iberia, basically, or basically in Iberia, we'll say, because this paper is all about Iberia, Paleo-Hispanic, onomastic. And most of the time where it shows with the varying suffixes, it shows on the west. I guess if we show the Celtic key here, oh, it doesn't show them. That's interesting because, oh, I suppose I'm confusing it with something else, although I did think that it was Celtic. Oh, here we see all of the ones in different ways. All of the, this is a best way to see the list. Celtiaticus, Celtius, Celtiatis, Celtiatus, Celtiberus, Celtianus, Celtigun. Celtius repeats a lot, so yeah, it's one way that we can see more or less. Yeah, quite a few. So makes it well attested that they were in these 10 zones. That's basically where they were found, these people who call themselves Celts. And now let's go through. So basically this was just to establish why is it that we're even talking about Celts at all. It's because of these people originally, okay? George Buchanan in 1582 named it after these people, okay? So that's why everything Celtic today is Celtic, is because of these Lusitanian people who call themselves Celts. Okay, notwithstanding the fact that today academics say that their language was not Celtic, but that's only some academics, and it's usually just because of the fact that they have a P, which is not confirmedly a P, since it's only a character, and what a Celtic language shouldn't have is not a P character, but a P sound, and we don't know how their P sounded like, and by the ambiguous evidence of P alternating with B several times for the same names, it could be that that P was pronounced B and therefore it wasn't a P at all, and that would negate all the arguments that these academics make for Lusitania not being Celtic. Nevertheless, the current consensus seems to be that it was a Bell Beaker language, so it's 1 or 2 levels earlier than these Iron Age, end of the Iron Age peoples that lived in ancient Roman times, and that language was then still left there from these from Bell Beaker times, and we don't have a name for it. We don't have a name for that branch. It was probably a mixture of Celtic and Germanic because of reasons that we'll see in other papers, but that's what we know so far about Lusitanian from most of the scholars. Most of their opinions distilled they would say that it's a Bell Beaker language. But we'll get to that with more details. Now let's visit some of the papers I wanted to show you. And I'll keep these things open because we might want to go back to it as I'm talking about them. Just organize this a little bit more maybe. And so the Wikipedia article didn't help us. Maybe we'll continue to see what else does it say that we could use as a hook. So basically we've corrected this part of Wikipedia's paragraph by telling you exactly where these Celts name comes from, at least. And so it raises the question, why is it that these groups are called Celtic groups? Well, the answer at hand would be that it's because they speak Celtic languages. But again, we will see later that people aren't usually named after languages, aren't never named after languages, and so we shouldn't start this fashion. Rather, the Gaels speak Gaelic, and the Britons speak or spoke Brittonic, and the Galatians spoke Galatian, and so on and so forth. And the Celtiberians spoke Celtiberian, and the Celti from Lusitania spoke Celtic. That's what they would have said that their language is if you took a time machine and went back to Western Rome. I'm so sorry. Went back to Western Iberia and asked these peoples that live right on top of these tin mines. Well, we know what they call themselves. You wouldn't have to ask that, but you could ask them, what language do you speak? And just like the Latini spoke Latina lingua, and just like the Romans after that gave us what we called Romance, it's actually Romanike, right? It's spelled, it would be with an I-C-E, but then we abbreviate that after the N, it becomes Romance, that's why. But it's basic Romanic. The Romanic languages or Romance languages are named after vulgar, the vulgar languages that the Romans spoke. I know that some people say that there wasn't a vulgar Latin. They don't like to call it vulgar Latin, but I'll show you later that the Max Planck Institute found out that the modern Romance languages actually do come from non-classical version of Latin that is after Latin. So if you don't want to call that vulgar, it's just a naming issue, but it did exist separate from Latin. And according to the Max Planck Institute, the modern Romance languages cannot be derived straight from Latin. They must come from this midway point between Latin and the modern Romance languages that we might as well call vulgar Latin. I'll show you that later. I'll write it down here. Show that vulgar Latin must have existed as per Max Planck Institute. And one of the things I was going to show you that there were Celti in Western Spain, I already did, so I'm going to delete that. And where are we going to go from here? Probably one of the papers. We were simply continuing this to see what else it gives us in terms of introduction, to see if we can get a hook from here. The interrelationships of ethnicity, language, and culture are unclear and debated. Actually, they're very clear. This is the hook that I'm going to use. And so I'm going to show you how clear they are. And I don't know if I play a YouTube video here, if it would come out with sound. But let me see if I can find a video. I'm going to search for it on outside of this screen. And then I'll transfer the URL here if I can find it. It should be findable by typing David Reich Bell Beakers. Let's see. That's it. And we'll see if it'll play with sound. And if it doesn't, maybe I'll tell you what it says or something like that. We'll find a way. So I'm going to play it, and then I'm going to check on my end if it is properly playing with sound. Let me go through the ad first.
Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the further spread of Indo-European languages, and in particular in Britain, where we have our best data. So at the same time that the corded ware complex was overspreading Eastern Europe, an equally impressive phenomenon as reflected in the pots people made and the tools people made and the buttons people buried in their burials and the whole series of ritual artifacts that were left behind in graves was spreading in Western Europe. And it was these bell beakers were one of the it's named after the bell beakers, these bell-shaped beautiful pots that they made that first appear in Iberia in Spain about 4,700 years ago and then spread within 200 years to Central Europe. And once they get to Central Europe, they go everywhere. So they go to Britain, to Ireland, they go to Central Europe, and they go all the way to Poland, into Hungary, into southern, into northern Italy. And a question that we wanted to ask is, what was the ancestry that was spread? In 2015, we had some samples from Germany where they had spread 200 years after they originated, and they were like the corded ware, lots of steppe ancestry. So we collected at the beginning of this year 400 new ancient DNA samples, and many of them were from bell beaker associated burials. Here in red is where the bell beaker associated burials were, and we looked at their ancestry and we got a surprise. And the surprise is that in principal component analysis, the same type of analysis I showed you before, they were not all in the same place, not like the Yamnaya. So different from our previous supposition, it was tempting to think, based on the previous work, that always a genetic culture, people making pots in a certain way, would correspond to people who all look genetically a certain way. But this is not the case with the bell beakers. They fall into two clusters, one over here, one over here. The cluster at the bottom is almost all Iberian people from Spain, where it first developed, and the cluster over here is almost all from Central Europe. And what we were able to show...
So unfortunately he said Central Europe. Those people he means as Northern Europeans. I will see if I can show this later. Let me continue to see if he says it.
Is that there's almost no shared ancestry between the Spanish practitioners of this culture and the Central European one. What that means is that the bell beaker culture spread between these two regions through communication of ideas, not through movement of people. Kind of like cell phones spread across people of different ancestries. A lot of archaeologists interpret the beaker burial tradition as a kind of ancient religion, and it's one that was clearly copied. In France and in Hungary, we even have graves where we have men and women buried side by side, both with beakers on their heads, buried next to their heads, but some of whom have steppe ancestry and some of whom didn't. So it was clearly a kind of proselytizing belief system which allowed new people to come in. So what we see is that there's not a lot of steppe ancestry in Spain, but there is a lot in Central Europe. But once this belief system gets to Europe, it spreads further through migration and brings the ancestry with it. We know this best in the case of Britain, where...
So there you go. And so I was waiting for him to make this more precise, because he doesn't mean Central Europe, and what he means is Northern Europe, but he's not being very cautious, unfortunately, with the label here. And so that's why he's giving it as an example Britain now. So let's hear this one.
We have 150 people that we reported at the beginning of this year, between 6,000 and 3,000 years ago. Here's a beautiful beaker burial in Britain. You see here's the beaker pot. There's a second burial with another beaker pot in this grave. And what you can see is that the people who brought this tradition replaced the population that had just built Stonehenge. So the last big stones at Stonehenge went up about 4,500 years ago. At that time, the ancestry of the people was all blue. It was all first farmer type ancestry. But bang, at 4,400 years ago, every single sample has typically 90% or more steppe ancestry. So there's a mass movement into Britain that essentially almost completely replaces the local population. And people in Britain today are largely descended from this new wave of people and share very little ancestry from the people who built Stonehenge. In Iberia and Spain, meanwhile...
So you see here that he is contraposing Britain with Spain. Okay? So in his mind, the way he labeled here, unfortunately he said Central Europe, but he means Northern Europe. That's why he exemplified it with Britain. And then now he's going to Iberia.
Like almost exactly the same time, we see something very similar. This is a different type of plot, but this y-axis is measuring the proportion of ancestry from the Far East and ultimately from the Yamnaya. And what you see is that there's no change between 6,000 and 2,000, 6,000 and 4,000 years ago in terms of the proportion of steppe ancestry. But then beginning 4,500 years ago, a new group, the steppe ancestry people, begin to come in Iberia. There's a 500 or 300 year period of overlap, and then the two groups mix together. The mixed population is not as dramatic as what you see in Britain. It's 60% from the indigenous local farmer population, 40% from the steppe people, but the color...
Which, by the way, that was only at first. Only the very first wave made the people 40% steppe and 60% local. But at the end, that's not how they end up. They end up 2/3 outside of Iberia and 1/3 only local.
Of these dots is the males in this group.
And we'll see that later.
And we're coloring them by their Y chromosome type. So there are typical farmer Y chromosome types, which are colored here in different shades of blue, and different steppe Y chromosomes types, which are colored here in red. And what you see is that after 4,000 years ago, the farmer Y chromosomes completely disappeared. It was 100% Y chromosome replacement. And what this is telling you is that only 40% of the ancestry in this population is from the steppe people, but 100% of the Y chromosomes are. So what that means is that the people coming in completely displaced the local males.
All right, so as you see, nothing about Central Europe was mentioned. So in his mind, Central Europe is in Northern Europe. Why am I making this point so important here? It's because Iberians are actually, we're going to find out, are Central Europeans. So we shouldn't be contrasting Iberians with Central Europeans. He's thinking of Saxon people who are from Northern Germany. That's in his mind the Central Europeans. And so that's why he's then now talking about Britain, even though all that ancestry from the Saxons don't go all the way to the Bronze Age, but nevertheless the Welsh ancestry, most of it does. So it can be exemplified by Britain. And he never said England. And so he is saying that basically the two Bell Beaker groups were the Britons and the Iberians. Just like we saw George Buchanan saying that the two groups for him are the Belgic and the Celtic, when he was contrasting the Belgic tongue and the Celtic tongue. I think it was around here. Let me see if I can find it again. Here it is. Belgic tongue and then Celtic tongue. You see? So he had the right instinct to know that Gaul had these two ethnicities. He knew them by tongues, two tongues, the Belgic and the Celtic. And again, that's north and south, respectively. But what we do know now is that they were Britain in northern Gaul and in Britain, of course, and that they were Iberian or Celtic in southern Gaul and Iberia. And we just saw David Reich telling us this from 2018, that the Bell Beakers from 2500 BC, that the Bell Beakers were these two groups. One Britain in the north and one Iberian, or Celtic. It doesn't say Celtic, but we'll use that name because we have seen who the Celts are here, that call themselves Celts, and we have also seen why everything Celtic is called Celtic. It's because of these people. And so we'll call Iberians Celtic as well. And we'll basically call all Iberians Celtic because of the fact that they share this ethnicity. Because basically there were only two ethnic poles that David Reich was mentioning that Belbecus identified with. They were the Britons and the Celts in the south. Britons in the north, Celtic in the south. Okay, and so Belbecus, though, they were a long time ago, 2,500 years ago. I'm so sorry. They were from 2,500 BC, so they were from 4,500 years ago. So that's a long time. And then we had the Iron Age, which is what is chronicled by the Greco-Romans. So what we should do now is find out what ethnicities were the Gauls in the Iron Age, because that would be the continuity of these Belbecus. The Gauls would be, along with the Britons and the Iberian Celts, they would be their descendants, the descendants of these Belbecus. So let's check on the descendants of the Belbecus now to see if they were still these two groups, Britons and Celtics, or Britons and Iberians. Okay, so for that we have a paper. Let me grab here the link for the paper. This paper is called Origin and Mobility of Iron Age Gaulish Groups in Present-Day France, Revealed Through Archaeogenomics. We'll get straight to the point here because I never want to, take too long if we don't have to. Let's read from the summary first. One part here. This genomic homogenization appears to be linked to individuals' mobility between regions and gene flow with neighboring groups from England and Spain. Okay, so let's see here. Let's find Spain here again. That skipped all of them. Okay. We first explored our data qualitatively using principal component analysis, PCA, by projecting the ancient genomes onto the genetic variation of an HO set of West Eurasians, figures 1C and S1. French Iron Age individuals fall within the genomic variability of the modern-day French population. How? In two different groups. Iron Age samples from Spain and Great Britain also fall within modern-day populations from the same region, highlighting a certain degree of continuity from the Iron Age to modern-day populations in Western Europe, confirming previous results based on mitochondrial DNA, that's mtDNA. And so basically what this is saying, and then it talks about decline. The PCA also shows a declinal distribution of our IA French samples according to their latitudinal position. The northern samples are closer to the extant Great Britain population, and the southern samples are closer to the Spanish population. These observations are fully consistent with genomic studies conducted on modern Europeans and highlight a geographically and genomic intermediate position of the French groups between northwestern and southwestern European populations. In other words, the French today, the modern French population, is the same as the Iron Age French population. The Iron Age Spain is genetically the same as modern day Spain, and Iron Age Great Britain is genetically the same as modern day Great Britain. And that Gaul sits in between, or also France and the French, they sit in between Britons and Spaniards. So what this study finds, and I think it also says this in a more... Indeed, we were able to detect specific affinities between northern or northwestern France and England Iron Age communities, and between southern France and Spanish communities. And so basically they found that the Gauls were two peoples. One, who they say are like the English, or basically everyone in northern and northwestern France, and the English Iron Age communities. They're the same. Let me see if they say Britain here anywhere, because I'm trying to see. No, they only come back to the one here. This is where they say in England, yeah. No, but then they say the intermediary position, that part. Let's find that again. So Great Britain, exactly. The northern samples are closer to the extant Great Britain population. So this is not just the English. It's nothing to do with some medieval Saxon component that they might have. This is a similarity with the whole the whole British population. Okay, so basically, the Gauls continue to be these two groups, according to this paper. They continue to be the two groups that they were when they were Bell Beakers: a Briton group in the north, and a Spanish Celtic group in the south. Okay, this is what this paper shows us. And I have, this is just one out of the 3 most important papers that I want to show you. This is the second one. Let's check out this other one. This paper is called Revealing the Recent Demographic History of Europe via Haplotype Sharing in the UK Biobank. So what the UK Biobank is as far as we're concerned, it's a place where people eventually they end up giving their DNA for some reason or another, and they also fill out in the form where they're from. So they fill out what country they're from. And unfortunately for us, they don't fill out the region of that country. So Italy will be meaningless here, somewhat, because it doesn't differentiate northern Italy from southern Italy, for instance. And but it does help us see who these Celts are when we look at this study and what it found out. And so if we look at this picture, and I'll make it bigger here. This is the whole figure 2 I want to show you. And we'll concentrate on A and not B and C. That's too big. So let's see where it found Iberia, right? That's the Celts, right? So Portugal and Spain, that's Iberia. And so it seems to have found out that they are related to the French and the Swiss, but not all of them. Now, why is it that I said about the biobank that the people say where they're from in the form? Because this cladistic grouping here, or the tree-like grouping that we see here, was made being blind to the countries. So for instance, this group, you know, the 3 groups here, and then the major group that they're from, this was found without the algorithms knowing which countries they're from. And then the labels were put on later. That's why there are such labels such as France and Switzerland, because they ended up in the same space in the PCA, and they ended up self-identifying as one group. In other words, the people who said France sometimes, some of the people who said France, and some of the people who said Switzerland that they came from, they ended up in the same place in the PCA, and that place in the principal component analysis, and that place is together with Portugal and Spain. Let me show you that here. So if we look at the shapes, there are three shapes here: circle, square, and this tilted square. The circles and the squares are the Spanish and the well, they are the Portuguese and the Spanish respectively. So the Portuguese are the circles, and then the squares are the Spanish. We know that because they go over here. Those are the Basques. Okay, and then these tilted squares are the French and the Swiss. We know that from this place here. You see, that's the legend. And so the French and the Swiss, and then we'll see that the French also appear somewhere else. We'll get their icon here. Let's get their icon. They appear with England 1 and 2. They are this teal square, and indeed the teal square shows up connected to these tilted red squares. So they are a continuum, the same continuum that other paper was telling us from Britain to Spain. That continuum is this banana over here, this blue and the red banana. You see this curve here, and then this is France. This is France, and there's another part of Switzerland that clusters with the Netherlands. They're this tilted purple square, and this is where they are. You see, they're all over here, very much overlapping with a few of these topmost tilted red squares, showing again a continuum from Switzerland into Spain, into Iberia. You see, now this little gap here is of course just the Pyrenees and the time, right? Pyrenees plus time. So geography plus time, people become isolated. And I have another paper that I can show you just to make quickly that point, that unfortunately PCA, it shows it exaggerates some distances, because you can see this and think, oh, the Iberians don't look too Central European because they have this gap. But let me show you something about that. So basically, this paper is analyzing some northeastern Italians that they found in some villages. Genetic characterization of northeastern Italian population isolates in the context of broader European genetic diversity. Again, we're going to go straight to the point here. Basically, all of the examined people, all of the tested people, genetically tested people in this study are from this tiny region. Okay, I suppose it's from Friuli, Venezia, Giulia. Okay, and let's see where they landed, because you would think that since they're all from a very tiny place, they would all land very close to each other in the PCA. Well, they're the red ones here, and only 1 and 2 of them are close to northern Italians. Then there's one that is further to the south, and then there's one that is very isolated to them, and even far. And then they're also not just the red ones, there are some of the blue ones here. So all these ones with suffixes, CI, G, SEG, ERG, and these are the Basques, for instance. So these northeastern Italians, they're plotting on the PCA together with northern Italians, together with Basques, who have nothing to do with with the northern Italians. Okay, they're clustering much western than Basques, which, how can that be? Basques are the westernmost people, but it's because they're floating in the PCA because they're too isolated. And PCA, because here are only the first 2 components, it ends up not making sense to translate to geography. Okay, and then we have the GRS here, so that means that they're going closer. You see GRS, let's find out what it is. GR, I suppose, would be only that, right? Let me see, I'm not finding it there. I guess it's because they're saying it takes S for south, but I don't find it in the legend what GR is. Oh no, these are Germans. And CIG, what is the CI here? CI Claudzetto, yeah. So that is one of the regions that they examined, okay? So it goes up to, one of the regions goes more towards the Swiss. You see CH here for Swiss? CH, Swiss, you see? So some of these northeastern Italians are closer to the Swiss. Some of them are closer to northern Italians. Some of them are towards Tuscans, you see? And then southern, more southern than Tuscans, so more towards South Italians. Again, these people are nothing alike. And some of them are close to the Basques, and some of them are more western than the Basques. But the point here is, they're not all in one place. They're not all clustering together. You see, they're all over the PCA together with all sorts of different peoples. So what this means, the point I'm trying to make here, is that PCA is not a good way to see which peoples are related, because this is not genetic distance. This is just genetic distance as one component, plus time as another component, making them isolated or not, depending on how much relationships they had with each other. And then geography, and so if there were mountains such as the Pyrenees or the Alps dividing them, then perhaps that would place a constraint on them and would make them more isolated, and they would float more, just like we see Iberia floating and creating this gap from Central Europe. But now that we have seen what I wanted to show you in this study, that the Portuguese, they cluster more with, and the Spanish, they cluster more with the French and the Swiss, rather than with the Italians, who are the Mediterranean people, clustering with Greece, Albania, and Cyprus. Okay, so these people are not these Iberians, even though we have the pigs, right? Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain, but that's only an economic term. It's not really ethnic. And when we say Southern Europeans, we're saying that more geographically. Oh, the Southern Europeans, you know, the Italians, the Greeks, the Portuguese, the Spanish. But we're seeing here that they're not very related. They're much more related with the French and the Swiss rather than the Italians, for instance. And now I'm going to show something that will bridge this gap here, because this gap, again, it's showing here just because that's where the Pyrenees are, and it's showing it because time passed for 2,000 years after these major population movements ended, and so they ended up having relationships only with themselves and procreating with themselves, and that's why they became isolated. Let me find the next study here that will bridge this gap. This study is called High Resolution Genomic History of Early Medieval Europe. And we're going to go straight to the point. This study does not use PCA. It uses something like FST, like genetic distance, indeed, properly. And if I zoom in, you can see that this F statistics, F3, so FST, or genetic distance or fixation index, I suppose. This now shows Portugal together with Central Europe, you see. And this shows better that the this continuum that started with the Bell Beakers and went through the Gauls of these two peoples, these two poles here, still exists today, even though this is from the Iron Age. But we know today from this other paper that said modern. Okay, so the Iron Age French individuals fall within genomic variability of modern day French individuals, and so goes for Spain and Britain. Both their Iron Age populations fall within modern day populations for those same regions, Spain and Britain. Okay, so that's why, even though this, despite the labels, this is an Iron Age genetic distance, okay, nevertheless we know from that other paper that this is the same situation today. So it exists, this tight cluster here then has a continuum that goes from Britain to Iberia. This continuum is, you may call, the Bell-Beaker continuum, or you may call also the Gaulish or Gallic continuum, okay? But I would not call this the Celtic continuum, because as we've seen, the only peoples who were calling themselves Celts were this southern half of these individuals, not the northern half. The northern half were, according to George Buchanan at least, speaking a Belgic tongue. It doesn't matter that may not be the case. What we're saying here is that they are associated ethnically with the Britons, okay? The northern half. And we can even see on the map here what Portugal is actually close to, and the closest to them are these and Portugal is representing the whole Iberian Peninsula. They're all the same, and the closest to Portugal here are these yellow squares with these triangles, and the yellow squares with the triangles, if I can zoom in here, they're not even that southern in Central Europe. They are as northern as well, they're definitely north of all the Alps, and they span the Alps from west to east. So they are in Alsace, or basically west of Alsace even, so basically eastern France, northeastern France-ish, and also in between Austria and Czechia, right in between there, where Bohemia was when the Celts used to live there. So those Celts from Bohemia, and also Hallstatt, which was all over the Hallstatt period, they were all over North Alpine territory, so north of the Alps. So basically joining eastern France and Austria and Bohemia, the peoples who were here in these places in the Iron Age, they were the same ethnicity as the peoples who were there in the Iron Age in Portugal, and still today, according to the other paper, okay? So you see how close they are. And then these other Central Europeans, basically in the same places, and also further up a little bit in central Germany. The Portuguese are also very similar to those Central Germans, you see. And so the Central Germans are basically in between, and I would say that applies also for Central Gaul, which the other paper told us. So you can say that this, it would be more or less on the 49th parallel, that these peoples would be divided between northern and southern. 49th parallel would go, you can't see my cursor, but it would go right where these squares, yellow squares with the triangles are, okay? And so that would separate northern shifted individuals in Western Europe from southern shifted individuals in Western Europe, both respectively matching Britons and Iberians, okay? So that's why I wouldn't, as David Reich chose to, I wouldn't contrast Iberians with Central Europeans when they are Central Europeans. They're not together with Italy. By the way, this makes again that same point that we were seeing in this graphic, right? Basically, we were seeing that the Iberians don't cluster together with the Mediterraneans. And this shows us again that the Iberians are actually clustering in a big continuum, a big Bell-Beaker or Gallic continuum, together with the Britons, not on top of the Britons, not overlapping the Britons, right? The Britons are one extreme of that continuum, and then the Iberians are the other extreme of this continuum, the northern and southern continuum, extremes, respectively, of this continuum, northern and southern extremes, okay? So basically, the Bell-Beakers exist today still in the same configuration that they existed as Gauls. Now they exist as Iberians and Britons and French in the middle. And so the point that I just made here is essentially the point that I wanted to make for this first episode of the KeltShow, is that there's a lot of confusion about the Celts, but if only we trace where the name came from, and then we look at them through time, from the Bronze Age through the Iron Age and through the Modern Age, as I have done now with these papers, we can identify that these peoples were always these two groups, a Briton-like group and a Spanish-like group, and that these peoples went through the Bronze Age, through the Iron Age, and to today's modern age, where they persist and still exist. And because we call the Britons, we might as well call these Iberians Celts, because that's what they are, that's what they were in their majority in the Iron Age. So I think that makes it clear. I think we have visited a lot of papers and a lot of content here. Let me make sure that I have everything good here going on elsewhere with regards to the stream, and then I'll be right back to continue this. Alright, and we're back. I guess there are a few things that I could finish with here before we end the stream. One, I'm going to show you that Vulgar Latin was a thing, and that Romance came from Vulgar Latin. That's a very important study from the Max Planck Institute, and then I'm going to use that as a hook to go to what is it that the Celtic language actually is, and if we can learn anything useful from that. So let's go to the Max Planck Institute's paper here. I don't think that's the name of the study. New insights into the origin of the Indo-European languages. I think this is the name of the article that they wrote about this study. I think the name of the study is something to do with the language trees, or maybe a hybrid hypothesis, maybe. But it's tricky to get to this paper, but we'll get to it. Hold on. They have a link to it from here. Let me see if this is the other one. A better link here. Yeah, this is the name of the paper. Language trees with sampled ancestors support a hybrid model for the origin of Indo-European languages. We don't really care about the what the study shows, or showed. But we do care about two things here. One, you see this graph that it put out? This is what its models came up with, the best models. Italic is light green, and then Germanic and Celtic are these two dark greens. And so Italic they found separated earlier, at around, this is 1,000 years before present. So at around 7.5 or maybe 7,000 years before present. Oh no, it's even more. It's 7 to 8 over here. Yeah, because it's this split over here. And so Italic split first, and then some, maybe 500 years later, or 1,000 at most, then Germanic and Celtic separated. That's one thing that they found out that is very important, and it's going to provide me a hook for the next paper. So that's important to know, is that the whole Italo-Celtic theory, I'm going to go over it on the stream. I don't know if I'll do it now or later, but it's doesn't have any credit nowadays. I think out of everything that they have argued about it for it at first, they had to end up retracting everything but 1 point or 2 points, because they end up showing in other languages. They're not that unique to Italic and Celtic and so on, and they are very arcane grammarian things that have to do with very intricate grammar. They're not like something that would convince a lay person that, oh wow, those languages must have been shared, must have been the same and so on, must have shared a linguistic cluster, because they have this feature that makes them so similar. None of them are like that. So it ends up that there's nothing to justify to these models that Celtic and Italic were ever together. But Celtic and Germanic, on the other hand, the models are pretty convinced. And I'll show you later that the Celtic language was actually a lot more like the Germanic languages than ever they were like Italic languages. I know that some people read Iron Age Celtic, let's say from Old Irish, and then they will compare it to Latin, and they will think, oh, these languages were so similar because of all these endings and so on. But every language was doing that now back then, even Germanic and even all the other languages. So those similarities that people see are very lay, and they're not very technical, and so I wouldn't call them similarities. Let me find the Vulgar Latin here. I believe it was in the supplementary, which we still haven't found the actual paper. This is not the full paper, as you can see. Is this the supplement? I think this is it. No, this is only 12 pages. There is a place that has the full paper. Let me see what... Is this not the supplement as well? Supplementary materials, yeah. Yeah, this is where it is. So if I search for... I don't know if they called it Vulgar Latin. Let me see where they found that date. So they do reference Vulgar Latin here. They reference this date of 813 as the split, I suppose. Lineage splits, okay, blah blah blah. Famous early documented historical recognition. The fully fledged different language came with the Council of Tours in 1813. This recognized that the spoken Romance of Tours had already by 1813 built up so many distinct characteristics that its speakers simply could not understand classical Latin. Is not at all, so 1813 is not at all the date for when change and divergence first began then, but necessarily postdates that by the many centuries needed for divergence to accumulate to such a point that intelligibility had been lost. That this is reported only as late as 813 is for socio-cultural and historical reasons. Okay. So, but basically by 813 there was a discontinuation between being able to understand Latin and speaking this, and being able to only understand this Vulgar Latin that is spoken. But still, there's a place here that says that the Romance languages came from this Vulgar one, but clearly at that time they don't reference it as the Vulgar one. Let me see if this is it. Oh wow, but it appears 85 times, okay. This hints at it. These are all related. Okay. So it says their analysis do not constrain modern spoken Romance to descend directly from written classical Latin. So at least in principle, innovations could be modeled as arising along the terminal branch to classical Latin, even though in reality, as a written register, classical Latin was relatively conservative and stable, while innovations would have arisen much more along the spoken branch to Proto-Romance. So I think they're calling it Proto-Romance. But can the model tell the difference? Okay, that is, the higher probability is that they are retentions in Latin, while alternative cognate sets in Romance were innovated on the spoken branch of Proto-Romance. By the way, they found a firm separation between Italic and Celtic. It doesn't say here. Oh, there you go. In various IE core meanings, the cognate set in Latin is found in only or a very few Romance languages, mostly those widely considered generally conservative, particularly Romanian or Sardinian. Across the dataset as a whole, however, Latin has no especially close relationship to any single Romance language. This predominant pattern supports the model correctly, returning these cases not as innovations to Latin, but as retentions. I'm not sure what these cases are. Oh, these cases that it does find that it matches Latin, yeah. In one meaning, the Latin cognate set is not found in any Romance language, but is found in Latin's two closest relatives. This is the meaning go. Okay. Okay, let's see after this part if it talks about it more, or if I'll have to search for Proto-Romance. I guess this is it. Examples argued for in earlier parts include constraining Old English to be directly ancestral to modern English and constraining written classical Latin to be directly ancestral to modern spoken Romance languages. We stress that we do not consider such constraints linguistically accurate. our main analysis found zero support for the constraint applied to force written classical Latin to be directly ancestral to all spoken Romance languages. So there's zero support that they found for the Romance languages coming straight from Latin. That's the point that I wanted to show. Let me see what else they say. Yeah, they don't say anything more about that. But basically, this is what I wanted to show, is that that's why they had to use the other cognate set, Proto-Romance, I suppose, to match them. So they found zero support for Romance coming straight from Latin. So that means there must be an intermediary. And that intermediary was Proto-Romance or Vulgar Latin. There's also something else that I wanted to show here. There is... they found within Romance, the primary structure is widely seen as some form of east-west split, but there's no consensus on where to place Italo-Dalmatian within this schema, or Sardinian outside it. Similarly, there's no consensus on Ibero-Romance as a valid clade, rather than just an idealized pole of a dialect continuum that transitions into Gallo-Romance. So this is another very important point, because it says that there is no such thing as Ibero-Romance that can be validly confirmed by the models. Only an idealized pole of this continuum from Gallo-Romance. So Ibero-Romance is actually just Gallo-Romance. They just want a different name because they don't want to associate Iberia with France. But they are associated with France, as we know from where they pop up. And in fact, there's another way to see this distance between Portugal and Central Europe over here, and how far they are from Italy. And also, by the way, these two greens here, very close to Portugal, these are Imperial Italy. No. Those are the bottom ones. Those ones up there, they are Iron Age Republic Italy, which is this square very close to Portugal here, the green closest. And then the other green with the X is Hungary, early medieval. So Portugal is very close to Hungary, early medieval, and to the Iron Age Republican Romans. But then when the Romans became imperial, okay, so the square with the triangle and then the circle with the X, they're Italy Imperial 1 and 2. So when they became imperial, they shifted south. They became more southern, together with the Anatolians, you see, from the early Bronze Age. So imperial Rome was Anatolian, but Republican Rome was more Celtic, was closer to the Portuguese from the Iron Age. And as you can see, they overlap with these with Central Europe, of course, but also specifically with these Longobards, the blue with the tilted filled in square. They're Longobards or Lombards, okay? And they're originally a Danish people, and then they ended up mixing with Central Europeans. And since we know the Longobards, we know exactly the route that they took, right? They went down Germany, and then through the east of the Alps, they entered Italy. And so because they were nowhere near Iberia, then the fact that they overlap with Iberians is quite revealing. Because as they went on mixing with these medieval Central Europeans, the admixture that resulted, it even ended up more southern than Iberians. So Iberians are a part of this Central European genetic continuum that starts all the way from these Germanic peoples all the way on the north, and ends up with, if you want to go that far, Hungarians going through both Iberia and Iron Age Republic in Rome. Okay, so that's where Portugal sits. It's not a Mediterranean country. It's nowhere near Anatolia and Southern Europeans. It's overlapping with Central Europeans. And let's see what else I had here to go through. Oh yeah, now we're going to use the this result here. Where is it? This result. The fact that it found Celtic splitting from Germanic. We're going to find out what that means from another paper here. Now this is a very curious paper, but again, I'm going to go straight to the point. We may go over the paper in more detail later. Oh, I don't have access to it over here, it seems. Let me see if I have this elsewhere here. Yeah, let me go ahead and transfer this paper. To this computer, and then I'll be able to show you. Give me just 1 minute. All right, we're back. So let's get to the point with this paper here, because the stream is ending soon. And let's see where it says this the most clearly. Let's find this here. I think I have a note somewhere of where this part is. Hold on. Ah, yes. All right, let's zoom in. Working hypothesis number 6. Non-IE influence in the West and the separation of Celtic from Italo-Celtic. The Beaker phenomenon spread when a non-Indo-European culture and identity from Atlantic Europe was adopted by speakers of Indo-European with steppe ancestry around 2550 BC. Interaction between these two languages, this is the important part that is doing all the work, turned the Indo-European of Atlantic Europe into Celtic. That this interaction probably occurred in southwest Europe is consistent with the historical location of the Aquitanian, Basque, and Iberian languages, and also autosomal DNA from Iberia, indicating the mixing of a powerful, mostly male intrusive group with steppe ancestry and indigenous Iberians, circa 2450 BC, resulting in total replacement of indigenous paternal ancestry with R1b-M269 by circa 1900 BC. So the older languages survived in regions that were not integrated into the Atlantic Bronze Age network. That's the Basque country. Basically, these two languages that he's referring to are the Indo-European that arrived into Western Europe, which he argues in many papers is called Celto-Germanic, and Basque. So this would need more fleshing out. This paper doesn't fully convincingly explain this, and also I'm not sure if it ends up adopting this hypothesis. But I think so. I think it does. I think it ends up adopting this hypothesis, working hypothesis number 6. And so what that would mean is that the Celtic languages are simply these Bell-Beaker Celto-Germanic languages. In other words, they weren't at the time, level that Celtic and Germanic would have been differentiated, but already past Italic, separating out. This Celto-Germanic language that was brought by the Bell-Beakers into Western Europe and Iberia and so on would have mixed with this Basque language, interacted with it, and would have turned all the Indo-European that was this Celto-Germanic in Europe, in Western Europe, would have turned it into Celtic. And so basically Celtic, he's arguing here in this paper, Celtic is basically a Germanic language dialect with interaction from the Basque language. Because the Celtic language does not show anything Basque, that influence must have been very little. It's so little so as to simply only separate Celtic from Germanic, but not really to add any words or vocabulary or way of speaking or anything like that. Because it wasn't the Basque people who adopted these languages. It was just some small influence that those languages suffered. But basically the people who adopted those languages were already speaking some Celto-Germanic Indo-European in Iberia and so on. And then those other waves of the Bell-Beakers brought Celtic there. I'm not sure exactly how he's arguing this, because there must only have been... Well, there were several waves from 2500 BC to 1900 BC. And so there's plenty of room there to transform and for Iberia to be first speaking undifferentiated Celto-Germanic and then later to speak a Celtic. But we do think that Celtic arrived there in 2500 BC, including John T. Coke. So I'm not exactly sure how he's arguing this right now. I guess the point here, though, is that he does think, and he compares it even here, he does think that Celtic is just a Germanic that was a little bit differentiated by Basque. And so in that sense, reconstructing the Celtic languages would arrive at something very close to a dialect of Germanic. And with that, I will leave it here. I will end the stream. And thank you all very much. And until next time.
But did they call themselves Celts?